Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Total Biscuit. Can we talk about Kickstarter for a while? I'd like to do that. That sounds good, doesn't it? Kickstarter. So you may have heard quite a bit about Kickstarter lately, and so you should have. So Kickstarter is a system whereby you can donate money to kickstart, quote-unquote, a project, and it's called crowdfunding. That's the nice little term that's being used for it. And it's not just for video games either. In fact, there are a number of board games that end up getting funded. There's one here. I would quite like the look of this. It's a card game called Velociraptor Cannibalism, which has actually been funded 427%. So there's been an awful lot of money actually pledged to make this game, which is pretty damn awesome. Hell, there was only a $4,000 goal for that. That's pretty awesome in and of itself. But the fact is that Kickstarter is being used to fund an awful lot of great stuff. Idle Thumbs, for instance. One of two video game podcasts I really enjoy. That's actually been funded. 400%, $120,000 has been spent to allow Idle Thumbs to be produced at a very, very high quality level. Hopefully the future of that cast has been secured for years to come as a direct result of that, which is awesome too. And most recently, you probably remember the whole thing with Tim Schafer. So he put out a request for $400,000 to make a Double Fine adventure game in a very classic style. The classic point-and-click, the stuff you remember him for, things like Secret of Monkey Island, Maniac Mansion, Day of the Tentacle, Full Throttle, Grim Fandango, so on and so forth. And it looks like that's been funded too, because he raised $3 million for this thing, which is unbelievably good, and it looks like we will get a classic adventure the way that we want. Gotta say, it's kind of interesting that we had to go that far to bring adventure games back, quote-unquote, because isn't that what Telltale have been doing for the past few years? As far as I recall, they've released a number of very successful point-and-clicks, including, of course, the Sam & Max series and the new Monkey Island games. But I guess people really want Tim Schafer to make another game like that. And also, I think that it is a indictment of the current state of publishing, that a game like that has to be crowdsourced. The funding has to be crowdsourced, and it isn't going to come from a publisher. And they will not invest. They will not back a game like that. That to me is absurd. Absolutely absurd, without question. And that annoys the hell out of me, I've got to say. Why is it that publishers will not take risks, even on kind of Xbox Live Arcade level titles? Stuff that would sell for $10 to $15. Why is that? One has to wonder. Why can we not have a return to all of these games that we have been asking for so long? Why can't we have an X-Wing versus TIE Fighter style or Free Space style game anymore? Why is that not okay? Why can we not have a 4X strategy game that doesn't consist of civilization? Why can we not have stuff like Master of Orion pop up again? We don't have a lot of options in that respect. Why can't we have these deep space sims? Why can't we have good flight sims? Why can't we have good point-and-click games in the classic pixel art style? Why indeed can we not have hardcore tactical shooters in the style of Rainbow Six Rogue Spear and so forth? There's a Kickstarter at the moment for a crowdsourced hardcore tactical shooter. That one's being headed up by a guy called Christian Allen, and he was part of the teams behind Ghost Recon and even Halo Reach and so on and so forth, wanting to make a hardcore shooter in the same style as Rainbow Six, maybe SWAT 3, and so on and so forth, which we don't really see an awful lot of. That's a fairly cool Kickstarter. Sadly, there's not a lot of support behind it thus far, so I would like to highlight it. And aside from that, I'd also like to highlight one of the latest, which is a sequel to Wasteland. Brian Fargo is a legend. Those of you who don't realize, yes, he is very much a legend. This guy founded Interplay. Interplay made a lot of very good games, incredibly good games. They also published a lot of good games. Don't believe me? Well, I'm fairly sure I can name a few games that you might remember that they've either developed or published. Descent, ring a bell? Baldur's Gate, published by Interplay. Sacrifice, one of my favorite games of all time, developed by Shiny Entertainment, published by Interplay. Giant Citizen Kabuto, very underrated and awesome title, developed by Planet Moon, published by Interplay. Free Space 2, anyone? You're getting the idea, I think. And he's looking to do a sequel to Wasteland. Wasteland was a game that came out quite some time ago, 1988 specifically. This game laid the foundation for Fallout. It was one of the first RPGs with a truly persistent world. It usually allowed players to solve problems in a wide variety of different ways, which is of course something that then led on to games like Fallout, where you could, say, force a door, pick a lock, convince someone to let you in, blow it up with a rocket, so on and so forth. It also had quite a lot of violence in it, and there was an unofficial PG-13 sticker on the game in the US, which was fairly unheard of at the time. That Kickstarter is currently doing rather well. At the time of recording, that particular Kickstarter is above 300,000 of the 900,000 they require. They have got some serious talent behind it, including the original composer for the music to Fallout 1 and 2. They've got Michael Stackpole, who is responsible for writing a great deal of awesome, if somewhat cheesy, novels for stuff like BattleTech, MechWarrior, and Star Wars, if you remember the original X-Wing Rogue Squadron books, which I enjoyed a great deal back in my youth. Yes, he is responsible for writing those. This project looks good, and what I really hope from these recent Kickstarter efforts is that the community, and more to the point, consumers in general, can prove that they really do want certain things, and that they are willing to go to quite extraordinary lengths to get them. We're talking about people that are willing to pledge quite a lot of money. I mean, over 1,000 people have pledged $50 or more to this project. We've got 154 people that pledged $75, but more to the point, 873 that pledged $100 or more, 214 that pledged $250 or more, $1,000 or more. There's 32 backers for that as well. It's nice for once to see the traditional publishing model turned on its head. Now, I don't agree that this is the ideal way to get funding for every single game imaginable, but it does prove, I think, a very important point that there is interest, significant interest, passionate and valiant interest in games which are not being produced at the moment. And that is a very good thing, because potentially we can see resurgences in those genres, and that means we get a greater variety of games across the board. Nothing wrong with that. Not at all. I'd like to encourage you guys to check out Kickstarter and check out those two projects. As I say, the crowdsourced hardcore tactical shooter and, of course, Wasteland 2. Wasteland 2 is doing significantly better at the moment, and it's got a great pedigree and vision behind it, whereas perhaps the hardcore tactical shooter, not so much, and not taking away from Christian's experience, but it's Brian Fargo, man. This guy is a legend even if you don't realize it, and he is responsible for the childhood of many. Oh, yes, he is. And we thank him for that. And now, hopefully, we're in a state where we can actually give back as a result of that, too. It's important that we don't forget the history of gaming that brought us to this point. And I feel that a lot of the lessons that we've learned in the past 3 or 4 decades of designing games are falling by the wayside because of how big-budget publishers actually work and the kind of games that we get out of them. A prime example would, of course, be Syndicate. Why can't we get a proper Syndicate 2? And I don't necessarily count Syndicate Wars. Why can we not get a proper Syndicate the way that we hoped that we would? No, we get a first-person shooter with Skrillex music. Not really what we were asking for, I feel. Why can't we get a proper XCOM? Well, thankfully, we do have studios like Firaxis still around, and indeed, the guys over at Goldhawk who are making Xenonauts. But how many other great games have fallen by the wayside? Sadly, quite a few. It's nice to see that we're getting some of those back, and it does fill me with hope for the next few years of PC gaming. We could have some very exciting developments going on, and you guys are partially responsible for making that happen, and that's awesome. So please do go and check out those Kickstarters. The links are in the description below this video. They effectively can act as pre-orders, and if they don't reach the goal, you don't get charged the money anyway. So it's as simple as that. $15 gets you a copy of Wasteland 2 and allows you to basically support the model in question. So have a look. Maybe it's interesting to you. There's a video on the page for Wasteland 2 that is very interesting. It'll tell you a bit about the history, as well as the trials and tribulations of getting a game like this actually developed. It's very interesting stuff, and hopefully a very worthwhile project. I wanted to make you guys aware of all of this, and this is little more than a PSA, really, just to let people know what's going on in that respect and make them aware of the activities that could potentially benefit them with the acquisition of some very awesome games. My name's been Total Biscuit, and I will see you next time.